You're listening to Impact, a Temple University podcast about service, sacrifice, and Temple made.
December 20th, here with Ivan Thomas. What should Wikipedia know about Ivan Thomas?
I would say the important aspects about myself, obviously, with the basic information, I will always want people to know where I'm from, who my parents were, my birth date, just, the important aspects of like recording somebody's life, but also understanding my military service, which is very important and impactful to me personally. Because of the sacrifice that came along with, serving those years. My education, I do really cherish studying, especially my time here at Temple. My time here at Temple was a time where I actually got to sit down and enjoy learning and being a student, even with all the things that, are happening in the background. And I would say an emphasis on the service, because I do a lot of community service and try to give back to Philadelphia, the environments that I'm in, Delaware, and the community of Delaware, and just overall where I can make an impact. So I would say those are the things I would definitely want recorded about me. Everything else is additional. I'm not a person who needs a lot of awards or recognition for things, but those would be things, if I was reading a Wikipedia, I would be proud of and, really feel like this was of value to know about Ivan and his life.
Where you grew up in Philly,
Mm-hmm.
what was childhood like for you?
So Philadelphia, this is from the late 80s all the way up to the early 2000s, was challenging, I would say. It was a time of, I would say, growth from the city. Philadelphia is still a challenging city. Poverty rate fluctuating between the mid-20s. So I grew up poor in the city in the Olney section of Philadelphia. I would say it was definitely a challenge. You see a lot of the statistics that, you hear about in today's discussions in the news and the media, but you hear them, you experience them firsthand. So it's like, I kind of correlated to flames. So I was like, I grew up feeling the flames of the statistics because it wasn't something I was reading about. It was directly a lived experience, going outside, seeing poverty, seeing drug use, seeing violence. And Philadelphia was like a little bit more raw back then. I would say the graduation rate was low. A lot of businesses weren't in the city. It was still a very traditional city. Like today, operations don't stop. People don't remember when Sunday everything was closed. After 5 p.m., most businesses closed. That was just a different time of life. Now I feel like there's probably a little bit more availability of everything because life doesn't stop anymore. So I feel like the revenue probably, helped the city to gain some legs financially and grow a lot more, because I feel like the Philadelphia I grew up, even the Temple I was used to seeing, is completely different now. Temple is just a whole different university than I remember it being. I remember being a lot of concrete, not a lot of students staying in the area, more of a commuter experience. And now it's like, Temple is Temple. Like there's no, like when you get to this end of Broad Street, you're at Temple University. It's more similar to, a school that would have a sprawling suburban campus.
What was your motivation to join the military, the Army? Specifically, you're in the Army,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what prompted you to join the Army?
I would say that I grew up pretty patriotic. I know some of that is by design because I was one of those children growing up, G.I. Joe everything.
Oh, yes. Who's your favorite G.I. Joe?
I would probably say Snake Eyes, but there's one that I'm forgetting. I can't remember his name, but I just remember his face and like him being on everything, but I can't remember exactly who that was. But I know Snake Eyes. I like the villains too, like the Cobra Commander. He was cool to me. But I feel like that started me down a path. And, you know, a lot of children's toys were based on the military. I had like the military trucks, the tanks. So I grew up with an affinity for the military, and I was always very active. And I wanted something that would also challenge me mentally, not just using my body, like more so along the lines of being able to apply myself in both areas and go as far as I want. Because I know being on focusing on being an athlete is a little bit different, where it's about talent. It is about mental acuity, but in a different sense. I wanted something where if I could apply my athleticism to persevering and, you know, achieving, but also if I braided that with learning, improving myself, academics, that I could also, you know, excel and go far, which is good in the military because eventually your body's not going to be what it once was. So I grew up very patriotic and was seeking something where I could use those skill sets. So that kind of led me to the military. I grew up so I'm African-American, and I grew up in an African-American family. A lot of our families, especially coming from the inner city, our mothers are very terrified of the military because their experience is, you go to the military, you're going to die. Like, I'm going to lose my child. So my mother was not supportive of that. She's like, no, you're not. You're going to grow up. You're going to go to college. You're not going to the military, because she just had that fear. But once I actually joined, that changed. You know, she saw that it was like really the right place for me, and it was kind of like confirming the decision I made.
You use the word patriotic, right? So what does patriotic mean to you?
I would say having a reverence and respect for the United States of America. I feel like over the years, as people gain more voice, patriotism changes, because you see a lot of aspects of things you might not like or things you want to change. So I feel like it's a fluid discussion. I don't feel like it's, because a lot of people are like, you're either patriotic or you're unpatriotic. You're either all the way in with America, or you are like all the way on the other side, whatever you want to paint that as.
Yeah, you can love the country, but you don't have to agree with its direction or politics or policies. And those are all entirely what makes this country really great.
Absolutely, and that's where I feel like I am now. My understanding of patriotism back then was very rigid, because I don't think that people remember the more traditional structure of households back in the like 80s, 90s, or even before that. But religion was very strict back then. Patriotism for the country, like people had the same symbolism hung up in their houses. Like you would see a cross somewhere in the house, a picture of Jesus if you're Christian, a picture of Martin Luther King. Like, these are things I can remember. Some of my grandmother's house, my house, like, you know, family members' houses, they kind of all had the same like semblance. So patriotism then was like, you know, don't necessarily speak out against the country, don't speak against the president if our parents like the president. You know, it was that type of patriotism. Now I feel like there's more room for all-encompassing opinion. So now I can, you know, be critical of things. I can speak against things that I don't like, because I'm always one where no matter what, because this is something that the military teaches you, there's always room for improvement. So there needs to be criticism. There needs to be, you know, a way for the country to continuously grow. Like, we're never going to reach a point of perfection, but continuously improving where we are and not regressing. That's the main point. Like, we should always be moving in a forward direction.
Never backwards.
That's what it is for me. So when I say patriotism, because a lot of people, especially being a Black military member, you get criticism, and that's just being realistic about the situation. I have to answer the question, how can you serve in the military as a Black person, all the time? And that's a weird question to me, to be honest, because when I think about it and I put that question into perspective, I'm like, for me, you're asking me now, and there were people who came before me who had to deal with segregated units, had to break down barriers, had to become the first to hold, positions of rank, positions of title when there was significant barriers and weren't given the best equipment, were put in positions where it was hard to succeed, and they had to fight that much harder to open the doors for anybody else to be able to serve. So it would be kind of disrespectful for me to look at and take that into perspective and then turn around and say, I wouldn't join the military, even though I would be great here and I feel like I could serve a purpose and I could really achieve and, serve the country in a positive manner and that's the thing. If you filter the people who can do those things, then you're depriving the military of quality.
Right.
So you when you're sending people to represent the country and go handle something, essentially they're conflicts. Who do you want in that conflict? Somebody who should be there with a sense of, belonging and is a very qualified candidate, or just the person who filled the seat because they were the next person up when there was an absence of those people. So for me, it was, when I answered that question about how can I serve in the military and be Black, it's a simple answer to me. I'm like, the people who came before me opened the doors so I could even have this opportunity or this experience to be where I am, which essentially, and I'm very candid, the military changed my trajectory and my life. So I would not have that experience, and my life would be different if it wasn't for the military. And I feel I served honorably, with good morals and good character. So I feel like I brought something to the military, and that's what you need. So if you continuously treat the military like it's an afterthought or something on the back burner, the quality of your military is going to reflect that. And when you go to conflicts, you're going to see these horror stories pop up: soldier under investigation for this event, unit under investigation for another event, and these black eyes that you're going to consistently get.
Yep. So, when you were thinking about joining the military, you consider the Army. Were there other branches you were thinking?
I kind of kept an open mind. I had heard from
what steered you towards the Army?
The Army. So I joined during the recession. So I started my journey in 2010. When I was looking, there were significant amounts of candidate pools that they could pull from infinitely, like people who are leaving the workforce after 15 years of management, people who have these very qualified degrees and whatnot. The candidate pool was vast because all of these people were losing their jobs because the recession in the market was horrible. So during then, the military had a more strict stance for things. So a lot of branches I couldn't serve in just because of my tattoos, height, weight. So they were being more strict because the candidate pool was very vast. And it changes because now, the Air Force was one of the branches that I couldn't serve in, but they call me now. They're like, hey, are you still thinking about this? We no longer have these policies or whatever.
Why was that?
So as opposed to then, there was a 2-year wait. So back then, if you signed up for the Air Force, I wouldn't leave for their combat training until after that 2-year window, because it was so many people entering at the time. The Army is the largest branch, so it's just the easiest one to get into because the cycle, happens much more often in the Army than it would in those other smaller branches. So the smaller branches, like the Marines, the Army, and the Navy, were very strict. They would have tests you had to pass, as far as questionnaires when you called. So they would ask you certain questions that if the answer was no to, you wouldn't even get to come and speak to a recruiter. They would just be like, I'm sorry, due to this, we're not going to be able to, screen you as a candidate. And then they would just move on to the next person. But it was very, very strict. And it's understandable because now they're hurting for applicants. All the branches are, missing their recruiting mark because times are changing. So that the reasoning for joining the military, when I was joining the military, a lot of people were joining because of a sense of patriotism, because of 9/11, because of the job market. So it was like a few reasons why people would be steered towards the military to want to sign up voluntarily, because there were two wars going on at the time, and they were in full swing. Afghanistan and Iraq were both happening, soldiers deploying. It was known that if you're joining during this time, you're probably going to one of those areas. Now, the sense of patriotism amongst the younger generations, I would say Gen Z, it's just different. Like, they're not as patriotic. They change their mind more often. Millennials also change their mind more often. But this generation following the millennials, like, if they don't feel like something's serving them, then they change their mind at the drop of a hat. So you have to find a way to appeal to generations and change. And the military is trying to do that, but it's also a very traditional and rigid structure. So it's hard. It's like changing a dinosaur into something that you want to be more appealing.
Do you think that's harmful to the branches and the culture of the military, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force?
I think in a sense there are some things, and then I also think in a sense it helps to improve the branches, because when you think about it, there are certain things that in the past were unacceptable, but they were changed because people came who were no longer going to accept what the soldiers, airmen, and seamen of the past were doing. And they said, this stops here. And then policies started changing, programs started coming about to help soldiers, and healthcare started changing. So I feel like it helps to improve things, but also there could be, because you're getting a candidate pool that's smaller, you're going to have to, sacrifice some things on the back end. So I feel like if you find a way to appeal to people where they're being taken care of, and they're going to want to stay, and it's going to drive more people towards the military. But because it's a numbers game, and it's like keeping the numbers balanced, because it's not like you can just raise the salary of the whole military to the point where everybody's going to want to join. That's unrealistic expectation. It's not like you can make it the most fun job on the planet all the time. So that's unrealistic expectation. So you have to bring those things in balance, where you got to balance the salaries, you got to balance the work-life culture, and it's hard to do because the military it's a job where you're going to sacrifice a lot of those comforts. I'm not going to be in the office all the time. I'm not going to always be comfortable. I can remember days of being freezing, covered in mud, covered in dirt, covered in sand, being amongst the elements, being amongst dangerous wildlife. So it's not one of those jobs. And it's something that like a person has to have an appreciation for. And I feel like generations of the past help prepare you better, maybe because we were outside, we were active. These generations, it's like, the video game culture is more prevalent, phones and like social media. So that's like the stimulation that you get. So it's like you have to see where the world's going and try to head it off and be like, how can I be a part of this culture, but also maintain the traditions that are important? Because if I don't, then you could start to, see a significant change in the military, which is not something that you want to see. But I feel like one of the things that the military does well is cater to athletes. So that's something that I would say they should, continue to focus on, because athletes would excel, especially like if they're a stellar high school athlete maintaining their academics. This is the perfect transition for them. Like for me, I played basketball in high school, I ran track. So like transitioning to the military just made sense.
What was basic training like for you?
So I went to Fort Benning, basic training. And from the gate, I was told, all right, this is the worst one. So my recruiter was like, I'm going to be frank with you. This is the worst place you could go. It's infantry basic training. So infantry was still segregated back then. There were no women in Fort Benning. So because there's no presence of women, the training's just harder because they don't have to, like, you could just get away with more. Like I could push these guys. I could, rough them up a little bit, and there's like not going to be too much complaining. We don't even know what the other basic trainings are like, so that we don't have a gauge to compare. Like, oh, this is so much more of a worse condition. We assume it because it's funny. I flew into the Atlanta airport, and Fort Jackson also flew in at the same time. So I'm there with a whole bunch of soldiers that are headed to Fort Jackson, which is co-ed. So they're all in line, and they're kind of happy, and they're like cheerful and going off to Fort Jackson. They're about to get on the bus and drive to South Carolina. Yeah, South Carolina. And so I'm in the line for Fort Benning, and it's all doom and gloom. There is not a single smile, no type of happy conversations going on. And I'm just like, this is where I like recognize the difference. I'm like, hold on, what am I getting myself into? Because over here,
I want to be on that bus.
yeah, over here, they don't feel like they're going to the same place we're going to. And like people were nervous. And even the bus driver's like a civilian, but he's like, I guess they had like told him like, these guys are about to go into basic training. So, be stern, be strict. So he was almost like similar to a drill sergeant himself, like being loud, boisterous, not nice to us, no greeting. Like, hey, if you're in a line for Fort Benning, stand over here. When I call out your name, like, just getting us ready for the experience that we were about to see. So it like started off immediate. So I feel like it was a good experience, but I probably came out a little bit different from a candidate, who went to basic training and was at, another basic training that was co-ed, because we were, put through the ringer and challenged. It was a different, I would say I feel like it was a more intense experience, because once I got to advanced individual training, my mindset was a little bit different from other soldiers, and that was like recognizable. Like the discipline had changed, and when you put men and women back together, like the discipline level is going to shift. So it's because now there's that dynamic of flirtiness, like, impressing the other soldiers, and adding that element back into it. There just wasn't as much discipline as I had saw when I was at Fort Benning. So I was immediately like taken back. Like, I'm like, I don't like this. Like, I'm still in the mindset of, being strict, being extremely disciplined. Everything leads to, some type of corrective training or corrective action. So we need to stay focused and perform well at all times. So when I get out of there and I, commingle with other soldiers from other areas, I just recognize the difference. So I would say it was a great experience for helping me grow and adding that structure and that discipline. But I guess it also made it weird for me when I got into the main population of the Army. I just could notice the difference. So that level of intensity and the discipline just changes things for you.
Before you went to basic training, I guess growing up in high school, were you disciplined at all, or?
I would say that I was, based on my upbringing, but I feel like there was a lack of structure.
Okay.
So there would be discipline, but the guidance wasn't necessarily always there. So because I remember things or aspects about myself being younger where I'm like, there were things religiously I would practice personally, and just, that's something that I'm doing to follow, my traditional faith. I could remember that, but I also remember like not having like the strict regimen of waking up, going to bed, school things being monitored and things of that sense. So I feel like the structure wasn't there as much, which wouldn't give me a lot of direction for being disciplined. Because if you got a structure, you know what to do, and you know to knock these things out. When I was younger, as a very young child, that's easy because it's all done for you. When you grow up and you get a little bit of autonomy, responsibility, it's not as crystal clear, because like these things before was like when I wake up as a young child, my mother wakes me up. When it's breakfast time, your parents have fed you. You might go to preschool, daycare, or wherever the case may be. You're put to bed when your parents say it's time to go to bed. But once you gain that autonomy, if the structure is not there, then it's hard to build a disciplined framework around that. Now, some kids are able to do that. I feel like my sister, she was just like kind of kept to herself. So she would just do her work, be involved in things in the school, and like find ways to stay to herself. But that helped her to build in a very disciplined regimen, because there was no ambiguity. It's like I got these after school activities, I got homework to do, and that's all I'm doing. Like that's it. So.
Was that very difficult to transition to when you went to basic training?
I would say, because I feel like I mentally prepared myself, it wasn't that difficult from what I remember. But I welcome the challenge because I always wanted to be in the military. So I feel like it's probably a different experience to me than someone who chose the military because they just absolutely were in dire straits and had to, but it wasn't something they wanted to do. I feel like that creates a culture shock. For me, what I would see out of the military from movies, what I watched, because I went through a course that showed you how it was in basic training that they had prepared. It was something given to me from the recruiting station. So I was welcoming that. So I don't feel like it was the toughest thing to transition into, but it's not like, people have to realize when you join the military, it's not an immediate change. Like they say it takes 7 years for you to transition out of being a civilian and fully accept being a soldier. So that's why when you're in the leadership role, like you worry about certain periods, like right now, a lot of soldiers are home on holiday leave, and you worry about stuff like that because it's like, those old habits that you went away from, now you got a significant amount of time off, and you're back in maybe your old neighborhood, or you're back around your old friends, so you do some things that you can't do anymore in the military. So for me, I just feel like because this was something I really wanted to do, it wasn't a hard change to make. And I liked the discipline, the rigid structure, but for me, I'm a person who thrives when I've been well prepared. So if the military immediately started out giving us all the tools we were going to need to succeed, we weren't struggling or going without anything. We had all the tools. All we had to do was perform and execute. Since I was coming from an environment where I had to grow up and not always have the things that I need to succeed, that was an environment where it was a welcome change. It's like, all right, this is my day. You giving me everything that I need to, fulfill what I have to do this day. So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to execute. I'm going to perform. And back then, there were a lot more people joining who really wanted to be in the military. I feel like that does change over time, because now I feel like there are a little bit more candidates who are going through some things and they're trying to get away from environments. So they're joining the military out of a need. So we threw we jumped headfirst into training. We jumped headfirst into the culture and did whatever the military required of us, which is a good way to succeed, but it's costly. Like the wear and tear on your body, wear and tear on your mind, wear and tear on your family. Those are the pillars of a soldier and their experience. If those pillars aren't healthy, then it's hard to succeed. So you have to be cognizant of just where you're at and the wear and tear and the burnout that you can experience.
What was your first deployment like?
My first deployment was not bad. We went to an area for a threat from Iran because tensions were heating up back then in the Middle East. The Strait for the OPEC countries were under some tension, and Iran wanted to stop the transport or countries from being able to sail through their waters. So we were dealing with that threat, and that threat I feel like didn't materialize as much as they expected it to, because the way we trained was we're going to war, and it's probably this conflict could kick off at any moment now. We need to be trained and ready. So we stood up a unit and we deployed within, I think it was 14 months, which is like not unheard of. Like, it's record time, because going from standing up a unit means you don't have soldiers, you don't have equipment, you don't even have training or any of the positions that you need whatsoever. You're going from zero to being able to fight in a war
in 14 months. Wow.
Yeah. So it was like, since I'm brand new in the military, I don't know the difference. I have nothing to compare it to. But now I could just imagine the unreal stress, pressure, the training. Because I remember once we started going to field training and preparing for that mission, we were always in the field. Like, it was, all right, in another week, we're going back out to the field. We're going to be out here for this many months. And then after that, we're going to work on, deploying.
What did your mom have to think about that, if she ever found out, or maybe she did?
I feel like that was just an adjustment for her, but I feel like once I left and she saw that I was, like, my mom is always one who's relieved when she sees that her children are being taken care of. So once I left and she started to get a calming sense of the military has him and he's being taken care of, that was better than I'm here in Philadelphia and with what was going on in Philadelphia at the time. She just was like, I don't want my sons in the city right now. So she was like, this is providing him an outlet to succeed. And I don't think she ever fully is just, worry-free. She kind of sort of balances that with, there's some risk here that I don't like, but I prefer him in this situation because I feel like it's doing good for him. He's becoming a leader. He's changing his life, and he's doing what he really loves. So, she was able to reconcile that.
That's good. Yeah, it's always worrying. Parents worrying it's a natural thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned that being in the military was life changing.
Mm-hmm.
What happened that made you feel that way?
I would say there's a lot of aspects. One of the most obvious was joining when Iraq and Iran were going on. Iraq, Afghanistan, the conflict with Iran, and a few other conflicts. Syria came later. There was just an opportunity to financially do things most people don't have access to. So if you can imagine being in your 20s, your early 20s, and having lump sums of cash to be able to do things with. A lot of people in the military, they laugh because they say guys will go out and they'll buy a Challenger. They'll go out and buy a Charger and put some rims on it and, pay a high interest rate. But that was one of the things that changed for me. When I came in the military, I came in under the mindset of, I want to harness this opportunity to make as much change as I can in a short amount of time, because I don't know how long I'm going to be in the military or have that opportunity. So I just looked at it as it won't always be there, so take advantage of it now. I kind of treated it like an athlete would treat the NFL. As long as I can do this, because tomorrow's not promised, and that's what happened. My knee actually ended up getting messed up when I was doing a missile reload. I got stuck in between some canisters and tore my knee up. So I kind of treated it like it was a temporary experience. And when I deployed, I took classes. I worked on my physical fitness. I tried to better myself in all areas, but I saved everything coming in. My enlistment bonus, my deployment money, my re-enlistment bonuses. I never spent any of that money in the military. So every deployment, I would make it a goal to save up to $50,000. And I hit that twice in a back-to-back period where I was deployed in 3 years. Out of the 3 years, I was deployed 25 months. So that's during a back-to-back deployment. Like I was in the Middle East, a unit came and replaced me, and then I was in the next rotation to replace that unit again. So with doing that, like in a short amount of time, that's more money than a lot of people have ever seen. Like some people were retiring and didn't have $100,000. I had $100,000 saved up and was looking at the potential of still, having my income, not having to worry about where I'm getting meals from or having to even dip into what I've already got saved, and I could continuously do that. So while I was in the military, I came in paying down debt, saving, educating myself, and trying to harness those things into, my future and, building for the future, which I was able to do. I started purchasing rental properties, which I have down in Wilmington, Delaware. My education, I was doing really well in school, and I was able to come to Temple University. And then the only aspect I would say that is continuously going to change is you're not always going to be able to maintain your health through all of the challenges. So for me, that's been a battle because I was in a period where the health care of the soldier wasn't necessarily paramount. It was the mission. So we learned to kind of be like have a holistic view of health where you need to take care of those things, because if you don't, your turnover rate for soldiers is going to be high. And then the blowback from that is when those soldiers go on the outside and we're facing our struggles, it becomes very public because people are going to realize with this large amount of veterans, their stories are heart-wrenching and, like they've run through the ringer. So that was a challenge that I'm still working through, but it definitely changed my life. I would say financially, with the access to benefits that I have now, it's just a different trajectory, and it's known. Like even in the U.S., like veterans are like the safest population to give loans to, safest population to give mortgages to, because veterans tend to do well after they leave the military. But there's also that element of people who won't adjust well to civilian life.
One of the things that you mentioned I thought was pretty interesting, and that was the turnover, health and mission. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So for me, I'm very candid. Like a lot of people don't like when you give too much of the truth, but I like when people are getting my experience for them to have the whole picture, because nothing's ever going to change if I just hide or, I give you the bright side of it. So I tell people when they ask me, because they see what I do, they've seen that I bought properties, and I speak to people and give them advice when they ask me about the military and what the benefits are that it could provide. And I tell them, it's a lot. There's a lot of benefits. It could change your life, but this is the sacrifice that I also made. So you get the whole picture. So when it comes to the mission and balancing the soldier, the military doesn't always do the best when it comes to making sure that the soldier is taken care of. When it comes to the mission, there are still a lot of leaders who will choose the mission over their soldiers. I'll give you an example. After I tore my knee up training on a missile reload, I had to go into surgery. So initially, the doctor had told me that I was going to have a minor surgery. In 2 weeks, I would be off the crutches. And after 6 months, I would be on a trajectory of almost being back to normal. They were like, it's a meniscus tear. It's just the tissue around the knee. We'll go in, shave it down, or, reshape it, and then you'll be good to go. When I was on the surgery table and they had already gave me a dose of something that was going to make me it was like before the anesthesia, it was something that they gave me that was going to make me a little bit out of it. That's all I remember. And they come to me and they tell me, oh, we looked at your MRI again. It's not a simple surgery. You have a hole in your cartilage, and we're going to have to do a microfracture. So they were like, the recovery is a year. You're going to be in a straight leg knee brace for 6 weeks. You cannot drive. You can't be up and about walking around. It's going to be a different recovery, and you're probably not going to go back to what you remember about, like, you know, your normal everyday life. It's probably going to be like you're going to lose some of your athleticism here, your ability. You might not be running anymore. Like, it was just, you know, a much more bleak situation. So I get the surgery, and I'm in my recovery period, and this is like right out of surgery. So it's like 2 weeks. So at this point, I'm still being taken care of. I'm not standing up, making my own meals. I just got to a point where I'm allowed to shower and stand up and do it myself. So this is like very rudimentary. Like, you know, I'm just getting back to not even normal life, but an ability, any type of ability. So I get a call from my commanding officer, and he tells me, we need this paperwork. We don't understand why you were out from work this long when
work meaning military, the service.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they're in the field at the time. So he's like, if we don't get this paperwork, you got to come out to the field. Mind you, so I'm like at a point where like I can't sit down on the toilet and get up by myself. I can't step over the bathtub like by myself. Like, it's like, you know, just a challenge because I'm in a straight leg knee brace and I can't put weight on the brace leg. So I'm just, you know, there's not a lot that I could do. Once I'm up, I'm able to move around and stuff like that. But there's like, things are not normal at all at this point. So they're in the field, which means they're actually in like a site somewhere training and like doing field training. So he essentially wanted me to come out to the field, and he had talked to another soldier about their surgery, which is completely inappropriate. This is not something, like, for one, that's HIPAA protected. So you discussing my healthcare matters with anybody is not supposed to be something that you're doing. But he went to and asked another soldier who got a meniscus surgery about their recovery, and he felt like they gave me too much time. And he wasn't aware that they had changed the surgery. Well, he wasn't aware of the story behind it. He was aware because he had access to all the paperwork. I had brought it in and given him all the paperwork immediately after the surgery. Like, I'm in the car under anesthesia, and I had the escort take those papers that I was given and take them into my unit so that they had all the information. Because I'm like, at this point, I've got a, like, you know, recovery medication that's going to have me out of it for long periods of time. So I'm like, once I go into healing, I don't want to have to worry about these things. So that's just an example of how they placed the mission, because it wasn't necessary for me to be there. It was just him, like, scrutinizing the health of his soldiers to see if he could, you know, use them for the mission. And it was like, there's essentially nothing that I could have been doing out there. I would have been completely useless. I would have been jeopardizing the surgery that I already had. And then it's just not a way to take care of soldiers. That's something a soldier remembers down the line. Like, you impact a soldier, and I don't think leaders realize this. When you fail a soldier, you impact them for the future of what they could have been. Like, you change their trajectory, because now they're looking at balancing themselves. When they don't feel like you're protecting them, when they don't feel like you're advocating for them, they start to do that for themselves, which is that's going to put them outside the perspective of looking at the same target and goal as you, because now they have to account for themselves, right, and, you know, make sure that they're part of the picture or they're being advocated for. So it really impacts the military as a whole. And I don't think a lot of leaders get that. So when soldiers get out and they have something negative to say, that's part of that. It's, if you would have, you know, put that soldier in a position to succeed by making sure that when there were issues, that you tended to those issues and you took as many things off the board as possible, as opposed to being an obstacle when they're already going through things, you can completely like ruin a soldier's experience. And once that happens, the quality of like who you're dealing with, you're going to say, oh, he's a bad soldier. No, he's a soldier that was impacted negatively by this experience. And that's something that the military has to get out of. Like, we've talked as leaders so many times about it, but there's a lot of experiences that have been that way. I know a soldier who was going to see a healthcare specialist at the same base that the Fort Hood, infamous Fort Hood, and the PA there, she was telling the soldier that like she wasn't hurt, and that she was kind of sort of like making this injury up, and it ended up getting to the point where that soldier ended up needing surgery. So like that could have potentially, like you could have remedied that in the beginning, you know, like started to take care of that injury before, because you're going to train hard. That's the thing. Injuries are going to occur. Like I threw my body 100% into the Army. Like I was going full throttle, trying to, you know, perform at peak condition, and, you know, really challenge myself. And I am 6'6". So like doing that, like it's almost like a professional athlete. Like my body over time is going to break down because, you know, it's a lot of mass. So we're doing jumping in and out of trucks. We're running over terrain. We're running every single day. We're getting these minor like cuts and bruises and scrapes or whatnot. But over time, those things add up. And if they're not taken care of, or if you don't care when the soldier, or you just give them a Band-Aid solution, which I got a few in the military. And it's also some gaslighting, because when you tell a soldier, we really don't think anything's wrong with you, and then they find out something is really wrong, they think back to all those times where you like basically told them they were trying to get out of work. We feel like you're using this as an excuse. And that's what the military is. And there are people who do that. Don't get me wrong. But if there is a legitimate issue and it's a soldier that you know performs this way, and usually doesn't have any type of issues outside of that, and they come to you with the issue, you should give that attention. Not always there's too many leaders that are in the mentality of these soldiers just use these things as excuses. Well, the VA could tell you, because they're treating these soldiers, that a lot of these things hold some merit. Like for me, I would say, even sharing my personal health experience, I deal with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So the military never diagnosed that, and I didn't know anything about it. So I'm like, all right, all I know is I'm having some like digestive issues, some like stomach pain, and it seems like it's there long enough for me to always like come back and get treated for it. So they would give me stuff like little over-the-counter medication, like a stool softener or something, just to like get me out the door. Like, all right, go back to the mission. And that's a condition that's progressive, so it's going to get worse. I didn't know, so or otherwise I would have wanted it diagnosed and like, you know, treated early. That didn't get diagnosed until the day before I got out the military. So at the end of like a decade of active duty, after being treated for this, not treated, but like seen repeatedly for this issue, it was diagnosed. Literally, I was in the hospital, and the next day I had to fly out of Korea and go home because I was done with active duty. And that's the day that it was diagnosed. But I just, when I got the diagnosis, that's what I was thinking about. I was just thinking about the times I was like being gaslit and told that, you know, we really don't think anything is that like problematic or wrong for you. But that being untreated, like if I had a blockage or something like that, which is something that can happen with ulcerative colitis, it would have been a significant health issue, or I would have needed surgery immediately and things of that nature.
That also compromises the mission.
It does.
Right? So if you're out on a mission and something significant does occur that is related to a medical situation, that does put the entire squad in jeopardy. Wow.
And that's what I think about, because the time where I was having the most issues with it is on deployment. And on deployments, you know, your diet changes. You're
That's
somewhere
That's
where
a big deal.
yeah,
It's a big deal.
and you're dealing with things that, like, you know, the quality of water is different. The environment is introduce you to more harsh realities. So it's going to, like, you know, cause certain things to flare up that you wouldn't experience at home or wouldn't notice as much at home. So for me, on deployment was when I was, you know, struggling the most. And I'm like, all right, I didn't try all these different things, and something is not normal here is all I know. And then, you know, never got seen by a specialist, never got referred to specialists, was pushed through. And it wasn't until, and not to be like shine a light on the Army versus, you know, other branches. Once I got stationed on an Air Force base, that's when they actually started to try. And I didn't have to start over, because I had an honest conversation with the doctor, and I let him know, I've been through these things with the Army. These are the procedures, and this is everything that they've done thus far, but they have never referred me to. They've spoke about, all right, if this happens, we'll eventually go and do a colonoscopy. We'll do an endoscopy to look and see what the issue is. But I'm like, I am leaving the military now, and this has never been diagnosed, whatever it is, and I need to know so that I can either get it treated or figure it out. Because at this point, like, it's like, I don't know if this is going to be a significant issue to me, or what it could possibly be. But if it is something that's very problematic, it's been ignored for so long that, like, you know, it's a cause for concern. So having that conversation, that's exactly what the Air Force doctor did. He scheduled me for an endoscopy and a colonoscopy, and then finally I was diagnosed. But it was because of that conversation, of the history of neglect that I told him about, that he was willing to say, okay, I'm going to do this for you. And then that led to me getting my diagnosis. So essentially he did me a favor that he didn't necessarily have to do. The Army, to get you to a point where because those things are expensive, you have to have certain criteria to get an MRI. You have to have certain criteria to go to get an endoscopy or a colonoscopy because of the cost. So it's a way of, like, reducing that cost, but it's at the cost of soldiers' care, because I needed one. Like, I was one of the people who met the criteria to get that type of procedure done, and it just wasn't happening.
So you grew up in Philly, joined the Army. You grew up around Temple University.
Mm-hmm.
You're here at Temple. How did you decide that Temple was the place for you?
I feel like it was a full circle story. So since my family is here, it was like leaving active duty and coming home was like the story for me. So it's like, you know, this was my big homecoming. I applied to Temple, I applied to Drexel, and then I applied to Westchester as kind of sort of a backup school. But I'm kind of at the time unsure. I just know what major I want, but I'm like, I need to apply to schools and see what my options will be. Temple was the first school to respond, and I feel like Temple was the last school. No, not the last school. I applied to Drexel first, just looking at the deadlines. And then after Drexel, I applied to Temple. Temple got back to me very quickly. Like, I knew I was accepted to Temple before I got anything. Temple had sent me an email saying congratulations, and I'm like, congratulations for what? So I open the email, and it's like, this is your TU ID to, you know, log into the portal. There's some things that you need to do, or something to that extent, but basically saying congratulations on your acceptance. I guess I was supposed to get something in the mail first, but I was in Korea, so my mail was being forwarded elsewhere. But Temple got back to me very quickly, and Temple is just synonymous with Philadelphia. I'm very proud of being from Philly, coming home after being all over the world, serving the country. This felt like a good place for me. Coming to Temple, coming into the MVSC, the Military Veteran Service Center, for those who don't know, and then coming and meeting the Temple Veterans Association with Mina and Rennie. It was just a different experience. I had been to University of Delaware, and not to speak down on any other university, I had been to University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and then a few military universities, but I never got the type of assistance there. There wasn't a culture of really like care. Like Temple really actually cares about their veteran population. They do a lot to show that they are appreciative, and they're working with veterans to make sure that we're successful at the university. They provide a lot of things. Just even coming in and they're like, hey, this is the office. If you want to come here, you want to study, because a lot of us are commuters because we're older, non-traditional students. I was literally commuting and not knowing, like I was sitting in like corners of buildings and stuff like that, just getting work done. And then I came and started utilizing the TVA office, and like my GPA was very good because in between my classes and before I went home for the day, I was able to do pretty much all my work. And after that, if I wanted to study additionally, I was able to do that. So Temple definitely like showed immediately that there was a environment here that I could be successful in. And then I feel like it's followed through. Like you won't get any negative statements about Temple University from me because my experience here as a veteran has been a good one. And I tell other veterans all the time, and I'm like comparing it to other places I've been, and I've been to some schools that were military friendly and designed for military students, and I don't even think they were as accommodating as Temple has been. Temple's definitely very understanding place, and they look for the solutions to issues because they realize that, you know, there's everyday life doesn't stop. Even in this challenging environment, I feel like now you've got COVID, and things don't stop here. So it's like, you know, what solutions can be reached so that you like there still can be some success, accountability, and also, you know, an environment where like people are not feeling like I'm just fighting on my own here and I should just, you know, I should drop out or I should give up. And that's the thing that some veterans, when they're in those type of environments, because we're struggling with a lot at the same time, when you become a veteran, dealing with healthcare is like our biggest challenge. We have to balance that with now a civilian career change. So now if we're becoming soldiers, I'm not the same. I mean, if we're becoming students, I'm not the same student I would be if I was, you know, 18 and I was coming here. Now I'm coming here and I'm like, all right, I got to take 6 medications. I got to wait and eat when I get here, take my other medication. I got some pain that I'm dealing with every single day. We got these other like health conditions, or, you know, even I would say one of the things that is overlooked is the mental health aspect. These are all things that veterans are dealing with as students, and we're getting better. I feel like TVA, those discussions happen all the time. Now they were taboo in the early parts of my career, where that culture and even, you know, mentioning that, you know, there was something going on with your mental health was, you know, kind of not done. You didn't want that stigma in the military because it would like cause issues for you. Now coming in TVA, we do mental health check-ins. How are you doing today? We have realistic conversations centered around depression struggles. That is important. You know, I feel like that's an experience that I didn't have around other spaces, and that's something that is here at Temple. So I can definitely appreciate the school providing that. So I feel like in a lot of ways, Temple's probably been a lot more progressive than other areas, even the military that I've seen, as far as like the overall care of trying to make sure that people are taken care of while also focusing on the goal of educating students.
Right. Yeah. We want our students to be successful. Um, be While you were here during COVID, that was a very challenging time. We all went remote. Classroom environment got disrupted. But I remember we were exchanging emails regarding the summer. How was summer of 2020 getting deployed to different places? What was that like, and how did that play into your educational experience?
So I would say, so getting deployed now, because I'm in the National Guard. So leaving active duty and going into a National Guard unit, I guess I had some expectations of, okay, this is the National Guard. And I was stabilized. I had a stabilization of 2 years, which means that they couldn't deploy me forward to like overseas or something like that, because I need these 2 years to settle in, finish school, or whatever the case may be. I don't think anybody could have projected the type of like period that was going to be. I just got out during a perfect storm of everything. I could remember coming home, and I'm literally coming from the airport, but I'm on terminal leave at this point, which means that like I'm still in the military, but they're using up my leave days until like this final date of separation, and then I am now not active duty. I'm National Guard, and my primary job I was a 14 Tango, so we were missile operators, and I'm riding in the car with my family. We're leaving the airport, and I hear that Iran has sent missiles into Iraq at a U.S. base, and that it was either 12 or 14,000 soldiers were being sent over there due to that incident. And that pretty much was like my entire branch that was being sent over there. So I'm just like, everything is happening immediately. And then like COVID happened after that. And it's still something that we're balancing. And then COVID got so bad, the Capitol insurrection happened, the George Floyd riots happened, and then being activated for COVID because there's a shortage of workers, which was something that we were backfilling and balancing. So there's been continuous activations. So pretty much, if there's always something that, like, if you don't have something obligating you, I can always, at this point, be doing National Guard work at all times almost. So that was the challenge of being a soldier, and I can come to them and tell them that I'm being a student, but if the mission dictates I can't be a student right now, I have to. And Bendu just went through this because she went on the deployment and came back. That the mission does supersede, you going to school. It supersedes anything. Like if my wife is with child, or if I have something going on where I feel like I should be present, I still could be called away and be obligated to, fulfill my duties, which it's a challenge to balance that. And sometimes it can be met. And I would say sometimes you're going to have to take a step back and be like, all right, I have to take this semester off. Like there's a few times where I was like, okay, I'll try to balance this. I'm going to be activated. And I feel like that the Capitol insurrection was a good gauge of that. So the Capitol insurrection happened on January 6th. So literally the start of this semester is about to happen, and I'm watching this unfold on the news. And I'm just knowing, like, I know I'm a military police officer, so we're going in. I'm just going to wait for the call, but I'm just going to start getting my stuff ready. We're going to DC. Sure enough, 10 o'clock in the afternoon, they're like, prepare your bags in within 72 hours, you will be in DC. It wasn't 72 hours. We were in DC like the next day. We left to the unit, went through like a SRP process of us getting ready to go down there, and then we were in DC sometime that next day. school still hasn't started, so I'm like, all right, I just need to communicate and make sure that I make these professors aware that this is what we're doing right now. So school started, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to be a little bit behind, but I feel like it's survivable. It's still early in the semester, and so towards the end of that period, where they're looking at sending us home, I get COVID. Mind you, I am staying away from people. I'm wearing my mask.
This was early 2020, right?
So like this is my first bout with COVID. After being in the house and being segregated, staying away from people, I get called to this insurrection, and then I get COVID at the end of it. There were 33 soldiers that got it. It was a asymptomatic strain, except for 2 people, and I happen to be one of the 2 people who actually had symptoms. So the unit left, but I had to stay behind because they would not send any of the soldiers home who had COVID, because we would further spread it to our families and whatnot. So we were literally, they had a hotel that they had turned into like a makeshift care deal. So we would just all be in our rooms, and they would bring us meals, and we would just basically be sitting there until we got better. But unfortunately, while I had COVID, my sister passed away. So this was one of the times where I realized, like, pretty much that I wasn't going to be able to carry this semester, because I feel like there's too many events with me having COVID after the mission, and then also dealing with the passing of my sister. I was like, I need to reach out to Temple and figure out this situation going forward, because this is kind of unprecedented. This is not, now we're in the realm of, I need to make sure that I'm processing everything that just happened, and that I'm really making sure everybody's okay, that I'm okay, and working on getting back to a normal place where I can, come back and be successful. So it's definitely, I would say, challenging to be a reservist or a guardsman, or if you're active and something happens, because our priority is the mission of responding or protecting the population, dealing with threats. If the threat dictates, like, I'm going to respond, I still hold my duties to hold myself to that standard, where like I want to go and represent my country and defend from threats. I want to be an asset to the mission. I want to be involved and uphold the oath that I did take. I take that seriously. If there was a time where I felt like I'm just here to get the benefits or something like that, I would just leave, because I personally am still serving. Like, I have a reverence to actually the service aspect of the military. So when the time comes, I really evaluate things, and I'm like, where am I? Can I perform this? And like, is what I have going on essential to the point where I should not be in this mission? Or if the mission is simple enough where they can handle it and they've got enough people, then I had a conversation of, I just started this semester. Do y'all need me? If you do need me, I'll make arrangements, or whatever the case may be. And I'm usually open to making arrangements for whatever it has to be. But sometimes there are opportunities where they're like, oh no, we have the people we need. Like, you're good since you're in school. Sometimes, like, when it's 100% and they really need people, like when a lot of workers were getting COVID and they needed us to come in and, essentially be CNAs and, perform the duties of helping escort patients around a hospital and things of that nature. That was like, all hands on deck, because as so many people have COVID right now that they can't have, and even some of the workers with COVID were still having to work, which was just a really crazy period, because they were just that really short on people. So when it's that type of situation, I don't have as much flexibility, and I wouldn't really push back. Like if it's that essential, then I'm just like going to, go and fulfill my obligations. And then I would, talk to Temple and let them know. And, I feel like there's flexibility that some professors have, and then sometimes their hands are also tied. So I don't really fault professors when they say, hey, you just missed too much time, because I definitely understand. But it's like, if I'm fulfilling that obligation, I don't feel like bad about that situation. It's just unique. And I guess it's just weird because I also realized like this past few years for the military has been very rough.
The Afghan withdrawal as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's just like kind of it's unprecedented. Like the things, like all the events, it's so many things that when I realized I forgot about like a major event, I'm just like, it was so many things that happened in that short period of time that I can't even remember them all. I'm like, I feel like my career compared to these last few years has been kind of like mild, because I'm like, since I've been in the National Guard, like there's been something major happening like every 6 months.
Constantly being deployed elsewhere for one thing or another.
Yeah, there were a few times in my career, like even in Ukraine, the war with Russia and Ukraine, there were a few things that happened that led to emergency deployments in the military. But me, my friends, the friends that I made here, the friends that I have that are still on active duty, they've been everywhere. I'm like, y'all just came from Iraq. Now you're going to assist in Russia and Ukraine and these European countries, just being forward deployed as an asset for the U.S. And I'm just like, this is like, I don't remember anything like this at all. It's just a very, very hectic period, I would say. So navigating that, like Temple has to navigate it. I have to navigate it in my personal life. And, the military as an entity is also navigating it. So it's like getting those things to coincide can be difficult sometimes. And it's been a challenge, but I'm still here, still an active student, hoping to graduate in this spring semester. So
hoping there's no more disruptions.
Yes, that's my thing. I'm like, please just give me one clear semester. That is all I'm asking for. Like an uninterrupted semester where I do not get COVID, even though I have all my booster shots. Please, just one time. That's it. Just one period in a semester. Is not even 6 months. A semester. Just give me 15 weeks. That's perfectly okay. Of uninterrupted, no military disasters, no world-related events. Just those weeks, and then after that, you got me. Like if I need to go to Uzbekistan or wherever the case may be, go ahead and send me. But just give me those weeks.
We talked about one time over in the MVSC, we talked about your involvement in community engagement with your fraternity. You were very proud about some of the activities and things that you guys have done. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that is something that was important to me because especially being a Black man in North Philadelphia, I know the community can be underserved overall. So my fraternity is a historically Black fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, and it's part of the Divine Nine. So it's mostly Black men that have historically, united in friendship and, served the community in a multitude of capacities. So recently we've had events like we did a turkey drive in conjunction with the Office of Community Relations. And that was like a very big event. I would say the impact, because the thought process around that was inflation is high. How can we help these people in the holidays that would make a small impact, but like kind of like a big impact. And we were like, well, because the cost of groceries are so high, the cost of turkeys is probably also, a little bit higher. And if we could take that off of people's plates, they can focus that on other areas.
Right.
So even during that, like the outpouring of support that we receive for that, and then the gratitude of the people in the neighborhoods just showed that even a small like tidbit of helping with something like a turkey really, like, it made people's day and made people happy, brought them some joy. And that's kind of sort of what the holidays are about. And then, we have like 5 members who came in on fall 20. A few graduated. So now we have, last semester was 3 members on the campus. So we do a lot of community service work and work around the campus with 3 members of an organization, but you wouldn't recognize that because of the amount of work that we do and the things that we put together, and us really using our resources and the resources around Temple, that we're able to make a much bigger impact than you would think an organization with 3 people would be able to. But Temple does give us an environment where we can, reach out to receive whatever essentially we need to do things in the community, and Temple welcomes it. So we've just taken those resources and applied them where need be. We've done candy drives, and it's really looking at the environment that's going on and trying to address issues that you can. So we did the trunk or treat, and that was done at Dunbar Elementary, which is right across the street from here on Montgomery. So the violence in the neighborhoods was an issue, and that's something that, Temple's been combating against. But, being in Philadelphia, the city is kind of reeling from the last few years, and the COVID didn't make anything better. With a pandemic hitting the city, you're going to go through the same type of issues of people being jobless, of poor people now being even more financially stressed. And then when you got the prices of everything going up and even more, crime is going to increase. We just know and to expect that. So with that happening and, these shootings happening, us just being able to give an event where kids didn't have to trick or treat in the streets where, it could potentially be unsafe was just a small way of giving back. But people really appreciated it, and they see you making an effort. And for me, one of the things I always knew growing up disadvantaged was that small impacts leave big impressions. So while you just may be giving a turkey, for the people who see that or see what you're doing or remember that at a time where they were really struggling and that really helped to impact them, it makes a major impression. And you never know how far that's going to carry someone. There are things like even people who would join our fraternity from the impact that was left and events or things that happen to them with their interactions, where they come back and say, I remember this from my childhood, and now I want to become a member and help to, further serve the community and be a support and, really be there. And that's the thing about the Divine Nine, as it's called, the National Panhellenic Council, is 9 historically Black organizations. Us as a collective, we advocate for the African American community, and we're usually there to be of service. We're also a tool, so protesting and advocating and making sure that resources are going where they need to is something that we've all historically done. And I'm definitely proud of the work that we've done here at Temple University, because essentially that's something that the African American community needs. And I would say that the MPHC is pivotal in making sure that a lot of those needs get addressed, and that we're not being looked over. Like there's somebody there who can keep us where we need to be as far as accountability, and making sure that the health of the Black community is being addressed.
That's very inspiring. Very, very inspiring. It's always good to see those that are willing and able do things to help others. It's lifting upwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would say this was a very good Wikipedia page for Ivan Thomas.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Covered a lot.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
Definitely appreciate the invite.
Yep. Always, anytime. This is really great. It was great chatting with you, learning more about you. So we will. Wow, it's almost an hour and a half. So we will end it, and maybe we'll do this again sometime.
For sure. Always willing to come back.
All right. Thank you, Ivan.
For more information on military-affiliated students at Temple, visit veterans.temple.edu.